The sun was still climbing over the glass towers of the city when my life took a turn I never expected. I had walked into the outdoor corporate courtyard with nothing on my mind except the presentation I had spent weeks preparing, but the moment I saw my boss, Arlena Moret, standing frozen beside the fountain with fear trembling through her eyes, everything inside me shifted. She wasn't the confident, unstoppable CEO everyone knew, the woman who could silence a whole boardroom with just her presence. She looked scared, almost broken. And when she stepped toward me, her voice trembling as she whispered that she needed me to kiss her because her ex-husband was watching her from across the courtyard, my heart stuttered. I didn't understand everything in that instant, but I understood enough to know she needed help in a way she couldn't ask for out loud. That moment felt like the beginning of something far bigger than either of us. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and unexpected connections, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Chronicles. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life. I had worked under Arlena for almost 2 years at Moret Innovations. She was known across the city as a powerhouse, sharp-minded, strategic, and deeply private. People either admired her or feared her, sometimes both, and I, Rowan Daxon, was one of the few people who saw a hint of the person behind the reputation. I wasn't special, just a mid-level project lead trying to make ends meet after losing my parents and carrying the weight of my younger sister's education expenses on my shoulders. But Arlena had always shown me a quiet respect, noticing details others overlooked, like the fact that I never missed deadlines, that I stayed back late when needed, that I listened more than I spoke. She trusted my work, even when she trusted nothing else. That morning, when she asked me to kiss her, it wasn't romantic, it wasn't playful, it was desperate. The kind of desperation that comes only from someone who's been cornered too many times. Her ex-husband, Callum, stood near the outdoor cafe sipping coffee, his posture rigid, his eyes sharp and territorial. The moment I noticed him, I understood. Some men don't need to speak to exert pressure, they just stand there and take up too much space in someone's life. When I leaned closer to Arlena and whispered that I wanted to help but asked if one kiss would truly be enough, I saw the faintest spark of life return to her eyes. Not hope, just relief that someone cared enough to stand beside her. And so, under the bright mid-morning light, with people bustling around us unaware of the emotional battlefield we were standing on, I gently placed my hand on her shoulder and kissed her forehead, soft, respectful, protective. A kiss that said, "I'm here. You're not alone anymore." That moment changed everything. Arlena exhaled as if she'd been holding her breath for years. The tension melted just slightly from her body, and for a moment she leaned into me as if she wanted to borrow strength she didn't have the energy to pretend she still possessed. Her ex-husband stiffened, clearly irritated that his intimidation had failed, and after several seconds, he walked away. Only then did Arlena finally step back, her composure returning piece by piece, as if she were rebuilding a wall she wished she didn't need in the first place, but walls rebuilt too many times always have cracks. And I began to see them. The days that followed were nothing like the rhythm I was used to. Arlena became warmer with me, not unprofessional, but human in a way she hadn't allowed herself to be before. I began noticing how often she worked through lunch, how many times she forced a smile for the sake of her employees, how every time her phone buzzed with an unknown number, her hand trembled just slightly. She was a storm wrapped in steel. And I, for reasons I couldn't yet explain, wanted nothing more than to shelter her from the rain. One afternoon, during a daytime team briefing, I saw her freeze mid-sentence when the receptionist discreetly informed her someone was waiting in the lobby. I watched her swallow hard, her shoulders tensing. She excused herself quickly and I followed at a distance, something inside me pushing me forward. When I reached the glass balcony overlooking the lobby below, I saw him again, Callum. He was speaking to the receptionist with the smug entitlement of someone who believed ownership extended beyond signatures on marriage papers. Arlena stepped forward with calm professionalism, but the strain on her face was unmistakable. He leaned in too close, smirked too deeply, spoke with a tone too soft to be innocent and too familiar to be harmless. And she stood there absorbing every uncomfortable breath as if she had no right to push him away. That was the first moment I realized something important. Helping her once wasn't enough. She needed someone consistent, someone who wasn't afraid to stand in the shadows she had been fighting alone for far too long. I made my way down and walked toward them, pretending I had something to discuss with her. Her shoulders relaxed when she saw me approach, and she excused us politely. As we walked away, she whispered a shaky thank you under her breath. She didn't owe me one. But the fact that she felt grateful for even small moments of safety broke something in me. Over the weeks, our connection deepened not because of dramatic gestures but because of small, human moments. I noticed how she liked sitting near windows during the day to feel sunlight on her hands. How she kept a photograph of her late grandmother hidden in her drawer for comfort. How she smiled at cheerful employees even on days she looked like she hadn't slept. How she always put the company first, even when her personal life was falling apart. She wasn't a powerful CEO to me anymore, she was a woman trying to survive the pieces of a life she never asked for. And the more I learned, the more I cared. One sunny afternoon, as we reviewed documents on the terrace of the company's rooftop garden, she finally opened up. No dialogue, just the story flowing from her in soft, trembling paragraphs. She told me how her marriage had chipped away at her confidence. How Callum had convinced her she was incapable of maintaining relationships outside him. How he had returned not for love, but because he couldn't bear seeing her thrive without him. Her chest rose and fell deeply as she recounted years of emotional exhaustion. And I felt something rise inside me, a protective ache I couldn't ignore. I wanted to take her pain and turn it into something gentle, something healing, but life doesn't always bless people with smooth roads when they're already tired. It twists things, stretches them, tests them. And just when I thought she was slowly regaining stability, everything collapsed again. During a major investor meeting, one we had prepared weeks for, Callum showed up at the building's entrance, demanding to see her. Security held him back, but the disruption shook her. She walked into the meeting pale, distracted, her voice thinner than usual. Investors raised eyebrows, murmured doubts, exchanged silent looks. The momentum we had worked so hard for slipped through her fingers. When she returned to her office afterward, she buried her face in her hands. I stood outside the door, debating whether to knock, but I didn't need to. She looked up at me through the glass wall, and the look said everything. So I stepped in, closed the door gently, and sat across from her. She didn't need comforting words. She needed someone to stay. And I stayed. Slowly, the pattern shifted. I began walking her to her car after work. We spent weekends reviewing company strategies in bright cafes near the river, away from anything that reminded her of the past. I saw the color return to her cheeks. I saw her laugh at things she once brushed off. I saw her rediscover the strength she had always possessed but had forgotten about. It wasn't romantic at first, not in a dramatic way. It was just two broken people learning how to breathe again in each other's presence. I felt myself falling, not because she was beautiful or powerful, but because she was human in the most tender way. And eventually, I began noticing the way she looked at me, longer, softer, full of a gratitude she didn't know how to express. But the real turning point came weeks later, on a calm, sunlit afternoon. We were working in her office when Callum appeared upstairs, having slipped past security under someone else's authorization. He stormed toward the office with the arrogant confidence of a man who believed no one could stop him. Arlena froze. When he pushed open the door without knocking, something inside me snapped. I stood between them. No yelling, no threats, just a quiet line he was no longer allowed to cross. And for the first time, Arlena stood behind someone instead of alone in front of a storm that he left furious, and she collapsed onto the sofa shaking. I sat beside her, careful and calm, and she leaned against me with a trust she had never given anyone else. That moment became a silent promise. We were no longer two isolated people fighting separate battles together. She reported everything. She strengthened boundaries. She protected herself legally and emotionally. I admired her more than ever. Her courage began rebuilding her world, brick by brick, sunrise by sunrise. Months passed. She healed slowly but surely. And somewhere along that journey, between sunlit strategy meetings, rooftop lunches, and shared moments of honest vulnerability, we fell in love with a gentleness neither of us had experienced before. But we never rushed it. We let it bloom at its own pace. One morning, standing on the same courtyard where everything had begun, she looked at me with teary eyes, not out of fear, but out of gratitude. She whispered that